Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sound Mind podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of music psychology. I'm your host, Sophia, and as a music psychologist, I'll be guiding you through everything you've ever wanted to know about music. So, whether you're a music lover or are just interested in the science of sound, you're in the right place, so stick with us. So, last week was the internet's favourite holiday, Spotify Wrapped. Everywhere you looked, people were sharing their top songs, their minutes listened, their listening age, and their clubs. And it's the time where, if you're not a Spotify user, you're probably feeling pretty left out. And as a music psychologist and someone who's worked at Spotify, Wrapped has fascinated me from the very beginning. I think it's so exciting because here's the thing. Spotify Wrapped isn't just data. It's not just numbers on a screen. It's identity, storytelling, nostalgia, and also social bonding, all kind of rolled into one colourful, shareable package. It's a time of year where your personal music habits become a story that you can share with the world, and it's engineered to feel meaningful, emotional, and fun. So in this episode, we're going to break down what's new in rap this year, why it works so well, and what music psychology tells us about why we love being told about our own listening. From your top songs to your listening age, from the clubs you're part of to the moments captured in this year's listening archive, Wrapped is a window into our emotional lives. And today I want to open it wide. But I want to start off with the classics. The features that make Spotify Wrapped feel like a holiday tradition at this point. Every year, no matter how many new bells and whistles Spotify is adding, there are certain core ingredients that we all expect from Spotify Wrapped. And psychologically, this is the stuff that really sticks with us. Wrapped wouldn't feel like Wrapped without them. They're familiar, comforting, and almost ritualistic. It's like the digital equivalent of hanging the same set of decorations on the tree every December. We know what's coming, but we still get excited about it. So, okay, first up, minutes listened. This is a big one. This number almost feels like your end-of-year report card for music, and people love sharing it because it gives us a sense of achievement. Even if you didn't win awards or run marathons this year, finish a reading challenge, you did listen to 37,942 minutes of music. And that counts for something, right? There's a quiet kind of satisfaction in it, like you've invested time in something meaningful, something that's been through you through highs, lows, and everything in between. And there aren't many areas in adult life where we really get this clear, quantifiable proof of our emotional habits. So when Spotify hands us that number loud and clear, it feels like a little celebration of who we are. There's also just something really identity affirming about seeing your listening quantified. As we all know, music isn't just entertainment. It's woven into our emotional life, our routines, our memories. So when Spotify says, you spent this many hours with music this year, it feels like a badge of honor. It's proof of the soundtrack that you carried with you. And it also taps into belonging as well. So when you see someone else post their minutes, you instantly compare yourself like, oh, they listen more than me. Or, okay, wow, I'm in the top 1% of listeners. It's playful, but it taps into our natural social comparison tendencies. In a way, making it feel fun rather than competitive. But it does create this kind of mini social hierarchy that's all in good humor, and people love that. Rap turns listening into this shared social ritual. And then we've got top songs, and the infamous top songs playlist. Now, this playlist is one of Spotify's smartest retention strategies ever. If you listen on autopilot for the rest of the year, chances are that you'll be clicking into that playlist over and over again. But the psychology behind this one runs a little bit deeper. See, that playlist is essentially a time capsule of your emotional year. From a music psych perspective, this taps into the process of memory encoding. So when you listen to a song repeatedly, especially during emotional or significant periods, your brain strengthens the associations between that track and whatever you were experiencing at the time. Music literally becomes a memory cue. So your top songs playlist isn't random, it's literally a map of your emotional life over the course of the year. And that's why listening back feels like you're revisiting a diary entry. You can almost pinpoint who you were talking to, what you were going through, where you were living, and what you were feeling when you had those songs on repeat. It really just helps to replay your year back to you and brings back those moments in a way that words often can't. The playlist becomes a form of self-documentation. I absolutely love going through my top songs playlist from previous Wrapped years because, yeah, it's literally like a time capsule from those years, and it's the easiest way to kind of go back that's not, for example, going through my photo library. And next is top artists. Now, this one taps into something that we don't always talk about openly: parasocial connections. So we form real emotional bonds with the artists that we listen to. We feel like we know them. Their voices become part of our daily environment, in our commutes, our workouts, our bedrooms. And music creates intimacy, and intimacy creates connection. So when Spotify tells you that your top artist was The Weeknd, which that was always mine every single year, or Beyonce, or whoever might have been yours, it can feel like recognition. I'm part of this community. This is who I am musically. And yes, let's be honest, being part of the top 1% of listeners just adds a layer of pride. And that's when that playful competition element creeps in, the I'm a better fan than you phenomenon. Even though nobody wins anything, it still feels like a tiny achievement. And then the artist messages actually take it one step further. Even though you know that they're pre-recorded, there's still something so special about seeing one of your top artists pop up and say thank you to you. It reinforces this subtle but powerful sense of being seen. It's like my listening mattered to them. And that taps into the psychological need for recognition as well, which is just deeply human, but super motivating. Then we've got top genres, a fan favourite for a reason. Genres are messy, fluid, and increasingly blended in today's age, but people still love them because they give us a way to categorise ourselves. Humans love labels, even if they're loose ones. You say, I'm a indie pop girl, I'm a alternative R&B, I'm a pop rock early noughties nostalgic. And these labels become identity statements. They help us understand ourselves and communicate who we are to others. They let you project who you are, or at least who you think you are, in a simple, shareable way. And even when the categories are broad or slightly chaotic, they still help us feel like we fit somewhere. And finally, top podcasts. Now, I know that podcasts aren't music related, but I did want to touch on this because I think it's an underrated gem in Wrapped, but it's also psychologically fascinating. Now, podcasts operate very differently from music. Music is emotional, but podcasts are relational. When you listen to a podcast, like this one, you're essentially inviting someone's voice into your personal space for hours at a time. It creates a deep sense of intimacy, which is almost like a friendship. You get used to the rhythm of someone's voice, their personality, their opinions. So seeing your top podcasts reinforces the idea that you've spent the year surrounded by certain voices, certain conversations, and certain ideas. And it also shows how multimodal your listening behavior is. You're not just a music listener, you're a knowledge seeker, a story listener, a conversationalist. It really highlights the complexity of how we use audio in our daily lives, and I really love that. It becomes a portrait overall of not just what you like, but of how you engage with the world. Together, all of these classics really form the emotional foundation of Wrapped. They represent identity, memory, belonging, self-reflection, all of the psychological ingredients that keep Wrapped feeling comforting and familiar every year. They're really the reason that Wrapped still works, even as Spotify as a platform keeps evolving. But this year, Spotify didn't rely on just the classics. They went bigger, more personal, and they dug a little bit deeper into identity and storytelling, which brings me to the new features, especially the ones that really took over the internet this year, making Wrapped feel a bit more like a personality test than a music recap, and I absolutely love it. Okay, so Wrapped has always been about the what, but this year it started answering the why behind your music listening. And I think that nothing is clearer than the listening age. So, listening age was the breakout feature this year. Everyone was sharing, debating, laughing about it, and trying to interpret what it means. And what's interesting is that it isn't just a gimmick, it's directly rooted in music psychology. And this was exactly the feature that made me realize I had to do a whole episode on Wrapped, because Spotify built this feature around the concept of the reminiscence bump. And if you're a regular, you'll know I've mentioned this phenomenon many times, but essentially, it's a well-established phenomenon in autobiographical memory research, and it refers to the consistent finding that people form their strongest emotional connection to the music that they heard between certain ages. Now, this is from late adolescence and early adulthood. They say between roughly the ages of 10 to 30. Now, these are the peak music years where your identity is still forming, emotions are heightened, and all your experiences just feel more vivid. Music from that period becomes unusually sticky. It stays with you. It holds emotional weight and lasts for decades. So Spotify essentially reverse engineered this insight and used your listening behavior in 2025 to guess what era of music feels like home to you. And they did this in a surprisingly methodological way. So first, they looked at the release dates of every song that you listen to throughout the year. Then they compared your patterns to people your own age. They've got your date of birth, so that's how they do that. And once they see the 5-year period that you listen to more than others in your age bracket, they assume that era represents your personal reminiscence bump. So, in other words, they inferred that you were around 10 to 30 when that music originally came out. And finally, they turned that into a playful listening age. So, if you're 27, but listen to more late 70s music than your peers, maybe you had a Fleetwood Mac moment this year, Spotify might tell you that your listening age is around 60. It's not meant to be exact or scientific, but it is rooted in a real psychological principle and really shows the powerful pull of nostalgia. Now, there were also eligibility criteria behind the scenes. So you needed to be born in 1925 or later, and you had to have streamed at least 5 songs from within the same 5-year period for the system to detect a pattern. But the beauty of listening age is that it gives people 2 things that we as humans love: an identity reveal and a nostalgia profile. It's playful, it's personal, and it tells a story that users are naturally eager to share. Suddenly, people weren't just posting stats this year, they were posting narratives about who they are through the eras that they gravitate towards. And one smart social media move that Spotify made this year was sharing celebrity listening ages. And by giving people this ability to see how their listening age compares to artists, influencers, and public figures, Spotify created a bridge between personal reflection and social identification. Suddenly, Wrapped isn't just a mirror of your own music habits, it's a way to locate yourself within this broader cultural map. And psychologically, this taps into the whole parasocial relationships thing. the one-sided but emotionally real bonds that we form with celebrities and public figures. Seeing that your listening age aligns with someone else, especially a public figure, you tell yourself, I'm like them. I share their tastes. I understand them. Maybe we would be good friends. But at the same time, it leverages social comparison, like I said, in this playful, non-threatening way. Humans naturally compare themselves to others all the time to understand their own identity, social status, and cultural alignment. And when you see your listening age alongside a figure that you admire, it provides both affirmation and a benchmark. You're not just reflecting on your own nostalgia, you're situating yourself in this cultural conversation, seeing your tastes as meaningful and shareable. I also loved seeing how people seem to create their own interpretations of what the listening age says about your music taste. So on social media, it wasn't just about the number. It really became a conversation starter, even a status symbol. People were joking and debating, saying things like, oh, the older your listening age, the better your taste. Or if your listening age is vintage, then you're obviously a music connoisseur. And psychologically, this taps into a few things at once. First, there's the self-enhancement bias, the human tendency to interpret information in ways that make us feel better about ourselves. A higher or older listening age almost has become this badge of sophistication or credibility, a subtle way to signal cultural knowledge and musical depth. But second, it's about identity construction and social signaling. People are using listening age to say something about themselves. I don't just follow trends. I've got an ear for timeless music. Or I connect with music across all different types of eras. It became a form of personal storytelling, a way to project values, personality, and taste, all in a single number. Finally, it demonstrates how shared interpretation and collective meaning-making works overall on social platforms. So Wrapped gave everyone the same data, but people transformed it into a social and cultural dialogue. Each post, comment, or meme added a layer of community understanding, reinforcing the idea that music taste isn't just personal. It's a way to belong, compare, and communicate with others. Another major addition this year was top albums. Now, this was the first time that Spotify has ever given albums their own dedicated spotlight in Wrapped. And this is significant because the streaming era is dominated by singles. I did an entire episode on this, but most people dip in and out of songs these days rather than committing to a full album the way that listeners once did. So by spotlighting albums, Spotify is almost rewarding deeper, more sustained engagement with music. But the criteria behind this feature was much stricter than most listeners realize. So for an album to actually count at all, you must have listened to at least 70% of its tracks. And those plays can come from anywhere. The album page, playlists, radio sessions, or even algorithmic mixes, as long as the tracks belong to that album. And the outcome is a feature that paints a picture of your long-form listening, not just which songs you obsessed over, but which full worlds, narratives, and artistic visions that you committed to this year. I think this is a really, really nice addition, particularly when we're kind of in this ongoing debate of are albums dying out? But it's really, really nice to see that they're probably not. Or at least we're adapting the way that we're thinking about album listening, which is an interesting transition in itself, I would say. And then we have clubs. Also one of the most talked about additions this year, and Spotify's boldest attempt yet, I would say, at turning your listening habits into a personality universe. If listening age gave you a nostalgia identity, clubs give you a community identity. This feature reframed your listening not just as something that you do, but as something that you really belong to. So each club captures the emotional tone of your musical year. And this is such an interesting concept. So the moods that you gravitated towards, the genres that coloured your playlists, the musical descriptors that kept showing up in the songs that you replayed. And unlike the traditional Wrapped categories, which are mostly about rankings, clubs are about emotion and identity. They turn your listening into a personality profile that feels both playful and intimate. So behind the scenes, the system is surprisingly complex. So each track on Spotify carries a set of emotional descriptors, not manually assigned by humans, but actually inferred from the titles of user playlists that the song appears in. This is super cool. So if your favorite breakup anthem shows up in a playlist called Heartbreak Hits or Crying in the Car, the track gets tagged with descriptors like heartbreak, yearning, or longing. And meanwhile, an empowerment anthem appearing in playlists like Boss Mode, Glow Up Energy, or Main Character would accumulate tags like confidence, swag, or motivation. And these descriptors form a kind of emotional fingerprint for every single song in the Spotify catalogue. And from there, Spotify rolls those descriptors up into 6 overarching clubs, each representing a distinct emotional listening style. They calculate a score for each club based on your streams, essentially measuring which emotional palette dominated your 2025. And whichever club scores the highest becomes your assigned identity. It's not random and it's not vibe-based. It's literally a data-backed model of your emotional year in music. And yeah, I think this one is truly, truly fascinating. I think the model is amazing. But I think what makes clubs especially compelling is that they don't just give you a category, they also give you a role within that community. So Spotify assigns each listener a specific role based on their standout on-platform behavior compared to other people in the same club. These roles add a second dimension to the club's experience. They don't just tell you what emotional community you're part of, but who you are inside of it. And altogether, clubs just reimagine Wrapped as a kind of musical personality test, but one that's actually grounded in real behavior rather than self-reporting. They've essentially created a new social identity structure around listening, this kind of digital tribe system that's surprisingly accurate, deeply emotional, and, of course, extremely shareable. I particularly loved seeing how much percent of listeners fell into the same category as me. It instantly made me wonder, oh my God, I want to connect with these people. I wish there was an app or something where you could just find people that were in the same club as you. And yeah, that really reflects how we think about music and identity and social connection, because I instantly thought, wow, I want to be friends with all the people who are in the same club as me. But finally, I want to talk about Listening Archive, or the AI snapshots. I think this was one of the most quietly powerful additions this year. I thought it was so fun, but the feature didn't go viral in the same way as Listening Age or clubs, but in many ways, it's one of the most intimate. Rather than summarizing your year through charts and rankings, the Listening Archive tries to tell the story of your year through specific moments. Spotify looks at your behavior across the year and identifies special days. So things like your biggest discovery day, your biggest listening day, your most nostalgic day, or even days where your mood or genre preferences shifted in interesting ways. So to qualify for this feature, you needed more than 20 days of significant listening and at least 2 eligible special days overall. And once your data hits those thresholds, Spotify's AI selects up to 5 of your strongest days and generates a personalized summary of each one, pulling in the artists, songs, podcasts, audiobooks, moods, and themes that define them. And the end result is almost like a musical diary. Not a list of stats in this case, but just a small collection of stories. It's a nice reminder that your year wasn't just made up of top songs or top artists, it was made up of moments. Days when you escaped, days when you remembered, explored, when you were searching for something. The listening archive transforms your listening into a narrative. And for a lot of users, I think it feels a lot more intimate and meaningful than the louder features. Actually, there was one more feature. This year, Spotify didn't just give us new stats and emotional profiles, they actually turned Wrapped into a social game. Now, this was really fun. There's a new feature called Wrapped Party, and it lets you invite up to 9 friends, I think, to compare your listening habits live. So, who logged the most minutes? Who discovered the rarest track? Who explored the most new artists? Or who was even the biggest fan of their top artists? What was once a private or socially mediated ritual, so, screenshots, posts, comments, is now become a shared interactive experience. And psychologically, that shift is powerful. Wrapped Party transforms what had been an introspective moment into this collective mirror, letting friends observe, compare, and celebrate their differences and overlaps out loud together. It really amplifies the effects of social comparison, but again, in a way that feels fun, low stakes, and focused on bonding rather than being judgmental. Instead of just passively viewing each other's playlists, people get to play their listening history like a game. This brings music psych and social psych together. Shared listening doesn't just reflect identity. In this mode, it really becomes a communal identity. And it also reinforces belonging and group cohesion. When you and your friends gather around Wrapped Party, remixing your memories, comparing your tastes, and teasing each other about rare listens, you're not just showing what you listen to, you're actually reinforcing friendships, shared tastes, and even making, inside jokes. Spotify has essentially gamified nostalgia and identity. So altogether, these new features really elevated Wrapped from a recap into something closer to a personality portrait. A psychological snapshot of who you were this year, told through the music and audio that you lived with. And it's clear that Spotify isn't just showing us what we listen to anymore, they're really showing us elements of ourselves. And it's really hard to escape that with something like music, which is so inherently personal anyway. So Spotify Wrapped isn't just a clever marketing campaign. As we've seen, it's a masterclass in applied psychology. And it works because it turns something deeply human, our relationship with music, into a ritualized, social, emotionally resonant experience. It's the one day of the year where people want to be analysed, they want to be compared, to be seen, and they want to tell the world who they are through the music that they love. Every part of Wrapped really taps directly into these well-documented psychological mechanisms. So I want to just finish off the episode by recapping some of these and really going into it a little bit more. So at its core, Wrapped is all about identity projection, right? When people share their Wrapped slides, they're not just simply posting data. They're revealing something personal and symbolic. Decades of research show that music is one of the strongest identity signals that we have, stronger than hobbies, fashion, or even personality traits in a lot of cases. It's why people say, I'm a rock girl or I'm a Swiftie, instead of simply saying, I like rock or I listen to Taylor Swift sometimes. By sharing Wrapped, we get to say, this is me, this is who I am, this is my year condensed into sound and colour. But Wrapped also taps into our natural instinct for social comparison, like I've mentioned. So psychologically, humans compare themselves to each other endlessly. It's how we understand our place in the social hierarchy. But Wrapped makes comparison feel fun rather than judgmental, like I said. So it doesn't feel threatening when you see that someone listened more than you. It's entertaining. It sparks conversation, teasing, even camaraderie. It creates this sense of collective participation where the comparison becomes part of the joy. But one of Wrapped's most powerful emotional hooks is how it taps into nostalgia and self-reflection. Music is inherently tied to episodic memory. Certain songs act like bookmarks in our lives, in our autobiographical stories. A piece of music can instantly transport you to a breakup, a holiday, a city that you used to live in, or just a version of yourself that you're no longer. And Wrapped condenses this into a digestible narrative. It doesn't just tell you what you listen to, it really becomes like that digital diary that I said, mapping out your emotional year step by step. And this directly engages the memory mechanisms of the brain, including the reminiscence bump and the way that repeated listening strengthens autobiographical associations. And then there's personalization at scale, which really is this kind of magic formula that tech companies dream of, but actually rarely achieve. And I think this was something that always drew me to Spotify. Wrapped is both a global event and also this deeply individualized narrative, something that millions participate in, but no two people experience the same way. I think I saw that in the first 24 hours, like over 500 million people shared their Wrapped, which is absolutely insane. But psychologically, this element of personalization satisfies two competing needs: the desire for individuality and the desire to belong. Wrapped gives you your story, but within a moment that everyone is collectively celebrating. And I think that's why people that are non-Spotify users end up feeling so left out on this day or week, because it really is a kind of internet-wide celebration. But the design is also another reason that it spreads so quickly. Everything about it is shareability by design. The bold colors, the punchy typography, the vertical slides that are optimized for Instagram stories and TikTok and all other social medias. It's really built for social first engagement. And Spotify doesn't design Wrapped and hope that people share it. They design Wrapped for sharing. Every slide is like snackable and eye-catching and just immediately legible. But what really makes Wrapped stick is that it's evolved into this collective ritual. Wrap Day now functions like an internet holiday. I think it's like the digital equivalent of Christmas morning. Ritual psychology tells us that predictable communal events strengthen social bonds and give people this sense of participation in something bigger than themselves. And Wrapped arrives at the same time every year. It's got those familiar elements that we went over. It's got new surprises, a distinct visual identity, and, of course, the social norm around posting your Wrapped. It's not just an app feature anymore, it's literally a cultural ritual. And Wrapped also provides something that people really rarely get in their daily lives, and that's emotional validation. Wrapped essentially tells users your habits are real, meaningful, and interesting. It gives people this sense of self-recognition, a dopamine reward trigger without judgment. It taps into the pleasure of being analyzed in a safe, controlled, playful way. No pressure, no stakes, just fun self-exploration. And people love to be seen. So, beyond everything else that I mentioned in today's episode, zooming out, Wrapped works because music itself is a psychological technology. Humans evolved to use music for bonding, synchronization, identity, and storytelling. You're not just a lone listener, you're part of these fandoms, genres, clubs, these shared communities, and Wrapped strengthens those micro-identities and gives people a place to situate themselves socially. Spotify Wrapped packages all of these different psychological elements into this colorful, playful, highly shareable annual ritual. And it succeeds not because it's built on marketing, but because it's built on psychology, music psychology. And that's really, really cool, even if the people behind it don't even fully understand the mechanisms that are at play. It's something so natural to us. It's so human that it just makes sense and it all just falls into place. And that's why Spotify Wrapped works. I think it reminds us that music isn't just something that we consume. We live through it. It's so tied to all the different moments in our year. And I think that's also part of the genius of it, that in this world that often feels quite fragmented, Wrapped turns our private listening into this shared, joyful experience that feels really meaningful. But that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Sound Mind. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate or review on wherever you're listening and share it. Share it like you share your Spotify Wrapped. Share it with someone who might find this breakdown interesting. Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's super, super fascinating. But don't forget to follow us and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Reach out on Instagram or on Threads at the Soundmind Talks. I would absolutely love for you to share your Wrapped with me. Let me know your listening age, what clubs you belong to, what were your top albums, top artists. Let's start a conversation. But until next time, keep listening, keep reflecting, and I'll see you on the Sound Mind.